Private prisons are prisons that are run as a private company or corporation that are contracted with the government to house prisoners or illegal immigrants in detention. The practice of using private prisons is fairly widespread but very controversial. Governments have started using private prisons largely as a way to save money and shrink the size of government. Many people believe that private prisons can be more effective than other prisons. Others see allowing a corporation to profit off of people going to jail as extremely immoral. Let's take a look at the pros and cons of private prisons. So the biggest pro to private prisons is that it saves money. This is the argument you will hear from almost anyone who supports private prisons, is that it's a way to save money. However, this remains very controversial. While there are some studies that do suggest private prisons are more cost-effective and do lower costs, there are others that disagree, and by and large, the evidence is not there to confirm with any certainty that there are substantial savings from using private prisons. Private prisons will also boast about the economic benefits that they will provide to the surrounding community in terms of jobs and increases in spending. And while this is true, there is again not evidence that it is any different than operating a public prison in the same area in terms of its impact on the local economy. One of the biggest cons of private prisons is that it suffers in quality, and specifically within that, the safety of the prisoners and guards working in the prison. Because these are profit-driven companies, and they're paid a certain amount per prisoner usually, the less they can spend per prisoner, the more profit they get to take in. So they try and have minimal levels of staffing and a minimal level of cost for the buildings, and they try and keep the cost down on the building structure itself. And all of these cost-cutting measures have, in some cases, contributed to increasing violence and lowering the overall conditions of these prisons. The largest problem, however, with private prisons is that they have an incentive to create more prisoners. And because of the structure of the United States government, they are often able to influence policy in a number of ways. Various private prison companies have been caught lobbying and using groups like ALEC to push laws that will be favorable to them, in some cases via creating more prisoners. And one of the goals of a prison is to reform people, is to have them come in and learn the error of their ways and then go back out into society and no longer commit crimes. Unfortunately, across all prisons in the United States, we have a very high recidivism rate. But for private prisons, they actually want to have a higher recidivism rate because that means they will have more business in the future. Because if their prisoners frequently return to prison, that means there will be more prisoners for them in the future. Whereas if their prisoners had a high success rate of integrating back into society, that would decrease the number of prisoners. It is extremely dangerous to have for-profit companies that can and do lobby the government and donate to political campaigns that make profits when more people are sent to prison. And as these companies grow, they're only going to push their agenda harder and create stricter laws and longer sentences that put more and more people in prison, allowing them as a company to grow and profit more. And ultimately for me, this is why, regardless of any pros, we cannot allow private prisons to operate in the United States of America.